The waitress gave a secret signal to the mafia boss. What he did next shocked everyone. The clock face above the pass-through was broken, its hands permanently frozen at 4:17. Clara Leone figured that was about right. Mel's diner existed in a slice of time that never truly ended, a 24-hour purgatory smelling of stale coffee and burnt grease. It was 2:37 in the morning on a Tuesday, and the graveyard shift was living down to its name. Clara moved with an economy of motion that came from years of practice. She refilled the salt shakers, wiped down the vinyl counter for the 10th time, and kept her eyes low. Her world was Briarwood, a small industrial city that had given up on polishing its rust. Here, at this hour. Her customers fell into two distinct categories: tired truckers hauling steel up the interstate and low-level gangsters running their mouths. Both paid in cash, and both were best left alone. Keeping her head down was not just a preference, it was a survival tactic. Her apron pocket felt heavy. In it, folded into a tight square, was the latest bill from the long-term care facility, Jamie's bill. It was 3 days past due, and the pink final notice stamp felt like a brand against her hip. She pushed a stray strand of brown hair behind her ear, her fingers catching on a knot. She was stressed, but stressed was a baseline. This was different. This was the cold, creeping dread that settled in her stomach whenever she let herself think too hard about the numbers. The numbers for Jamie's physical therapy, the numbers for his medication, the numbers that added up to an amount she could never, ever make serving coffee. Her brother, Jamie, had been paralyzed in a hit-and-run 4 years ago. The police report had called it a tragic, random accident. Clara knew better. She had seen the car that night, a dark sedan with no plates, idling at the end of their street 2 days in a row before it happened. She knew, with a certainty that lived in her bones, that it had not been random. It had been a message, meant for her. And Jamie, bright, funny. 17-year-old Jamie had paid the price for it, so she worked. She worked until her feet swelled and her back ached, and she tried not to be seen. The bell above the door jangled, a harsh, discordant sound that cut through the low hum of the coolers. Clara's spine went rigid. It was not a trucker. Truckers slumped, weary from the road. These men strode. They brought the outside cold in with them, a cloud of icy air and the scent of cheap cologne and stale cigar smoke. There were 3 of them, all in worn leather jackets, their faces shadowed by the diner's weak lighting. The one in the lead, however, she knew. His name was Mick Russo. He was a piece of the past she had tried to bury under 6 feet of concrete, and he was smiling at her. It was not a real smile. It was a baring of teeth, a predator's inventory. "Well, well, well," he drawled, his voice a gravelly rumble that made her skin crawl. He slid into the booth nearest the door, his men flanking him. "Clara girl, still slinging hash in this dump? Thought you'd be long gone by now." Her blood turned to ice water. The coffee pot in her hand suddenly weighed 50 pounds. She forced herself to breathe, to put the pot back on the warmer. "What can I get you? Mick?" Her voice was thin, reedy. "Oh, you know me. Just coffee. Black. Like my heart," he chuckled. A wet, hacking sound. His eyes roamed over her, lingering on the V-neck of her uniform, on her hands, on her face. "You look tired, sweetheart. Running from your past really takes it out of you, huh?" One of his men snickered. Clara felt the familiar pinprick of a panic attack starting behind her ribs, a tightening in her chest. She could not run. The kitchen was behind her, but Mel, the owner, was long gone, and the back door was bolted. She fumbled for her order pad, her hands trembling. This was it, the red line. For 2 years, she had had a contingency, a desperate, last-ditch plan Mel had reluctantly agreed to. She kept her movements small, routine. She grabbed 3 menus, slid them onto the table in front of Mick, and then moved back to the counter, pretending to check the register tape. Her back was to them, but she could feel Mick's eyes on her like a physical weight from her apron. She pulled a single, folded napkin. Tucked inside it was the stub of a red lipstick she never wore. With her body shielding her actions, she pressed the waxy color onto the napkin, a quick, frantic smear of ruby red. It was not neat. It was a wound. She folded the napkin once more and placed it on the stainless steel counter, right next to the pickup window, as if it were a finished order ticket, her secret signal, her plea for help. She had no idea if anyone was even there to see it. Mel only made the call if one man was in the diner. A man who sat in the back booth every Tuesday and Thursday, from midnight until 3 a.m., drinking a single espresso, reading documents, and never, ever speaking. She risked a glance. He was there, in the farthest corner booth, shrouded in shadow, sat Dante Moretti. He was everything Mick Russo was not. Where Mick was loud, Dante was silent. Where Mick wore his menace like a cheap suit, Dante wore an impeccably tailored wool coat that probably cost more than her apartment. He was the head of the Moretti family, the quiet, calculating hand that held all of Briarwood's strings. He was the city's worst-kept secret, a ghost story that parents told their children. Only this ghost story owned the shipping yards and the sanitation unions. He was also, according to Mel, the diner's silent landlord. Clara watched, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Dante Moretti's gaze was fixed on the documents in front of him. He had not looked up. He had not seen. She turned back to Mick, her stomach sinking. "Coffee," she said, her voice barely a whisper, and she reached for a mug. "That's a good girl," Mick sneered, then a sound, a soft, definitive clink. Clara looked back. Dante Moretti was placing his small espresso cup back on its saucer. He had not been reading. He had been observing. His eyes, dark and unreadable, lifted from the napkin on the counter and met hers. He held her gaze for 1, 2, 3 seconds. There was no warmth in them, no reassurance, just an acknowledgement. He had seen the signal. Calm and composed, he finished his espresso in one swallow. He dabbed his mouth with a linen napkin, not one of the cheap paper ones Mel provided. He placed a few bills on the table, far too many for one coffee. Then he stood up. He did not look like a mob boss. He looked like a banker or a lawyer, save for the stillness in his shoulders, the coiled energy of a panther. He walked not toward the exit, but toward Mick's booth. Clara stopped breathing. Dante stopped at the end of the table, his hands loosely clasped in front of him. He nodded politely. "Gentlemen," Mick, who had been laughing at one of his own jokes, looked up. His smile froze. "The hell do you want?" "Mick Russo." "Is it? I thought I smelled sulfur," Dante said, his voice quiet, almost conversational, yet it carried across the diner. Mick's bravado was immediate and stupid. "You lost, buddy. This ain't your side of town." One of Mick's men started to stand, his hand moving toward the inside of his jacket. Dante's eyes flicked to the man. He did not raise his voice. He did not move. He simply said, "I wouldn't—" The man froze. Mick's face had gone pale, the bluster draining away as recognition finally dawned. He had seen the suit, the coat, but now he was seeing the man. "Moretti," he whispered, the name tasting like acid. "Mr. Moretti, we were just having some coffee. This establishment is under my protection." "Mick," Dante said, as if discussing the weather. "And your presence is souring the cheesecake." He turned his head, just slightly, toward Clara. "Ma'am, I was told there was a fire code compliance issue with the walk-in freezer. Would you mind showing me?" It was a preposterous excuse. It was a lifeline. Clara nodded, her limbs wooden. Yes, this way." "We're not done here, Clara girl," Mick hissed, his confidence returning just enough to issue a threat. Dante turned back. He smiled, and it was the coldest thing Clara had ever seen. "Yes, Mick, you are." He did not touch her, but he walked beside her, a solid, unbreachable wall between her and the booth. He guided her past the counter, through the swinging doors into the kitchen. The moment the doors swung shut, the sounds of the diner vanished, replaced by the hum of the freezer and the drip of a leaky faucet. The air was thick with the smell of bleach and old grease. Clara leaned against the stainless steel prep table, her legs finally giving out. She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Dante Moretti did not try to comfort her. He simply stood by the door, watching her, his face impassive. He gave her a moment to breathe, to pull herself back from the edge. When her shaking subsided into small tremors, he finally spoke. His voice was different in the small space. It was soft but direct, with no room for misunderstanding. "What do you need?" He was not asking if she was okay. He was not asking what happened. It was a practical question, a transaction. Clara looked up, meeting his dark eyes. She saw no pity there, only focus. She took a shaky breath, the words catching in her throat. She could not tell him about Jamie, about the past, about the hit and run. It was too much. It was too complicated. So she gave him the only truth that mattered right now, the one that Mick's presence confirmed. She whispered, "They know where I live." Dante's expression did not change, but a muscle in his jaw tightened. Just once. He nodded, as if she had just confirmed an item on a shipping ledger. He reached into the inner pocket of his coat for a heart-stopping second. She thought he was reaching for a gun. He was not. He pulled out a small, black, disposable phone. It looked brand new, still in its plastic wrapper. He held it out to her. "There is one number programmed into this phone," he said. "It is mine. If he, or anyone else, comes near you, your apartment, or your brother, you call it—" Clara stared at the phone, then at him. "My brother?" "Jamie. At the Green Valley facility. He's fine," Dante said, and the casual way he said it, the fact that he knew, sent a fresh wave of terror through her. He had not just been observing her, he had been researching her. She took the phone, her fingers brushing his. His skin was warm. I cannot pay you for this," she stammered. "I am aware," he said. He turned toward the back exit, the one that led to the alley. "Call if you need me." He paused, his hand on the crash bar. "No second chances. Clara, I do not waste my time on people who will not help themselves." And then he was gone. The door hissed shut, leaving her alone in the sudden, ringing silence. Clara did not see what happened out front. She did not hear them leave. She stayed in the kitchen for 10 minutes until her heart rate returned to something resembling normal. When she finally pushed through the swinging doors, the diner was empty. Mick and his men were gone. Even the bills Dante had left on his table were gone, though his espresso cup remained. The rest of her shift passed in a blur of crippling anxiety. She cleaned the coffee machine, mopped the floors, and watched the sun begin to stain the gray Briarwood sky with shades of pink and orange. At 5 a.m., Mel's day shift replacement arrived, and Clara clocked out. The walk home was the longest of her life. Every car that slowed, every person walking their dog, every shadow in a doorway was a threat. Her apartment was in a rundown 3-story building, the kind of place where you did not ask your neighbors their names. She climbed the stairs to the second floor, her keys clutched in her hand like a weapon. She reached her door. Apartment 2B. She stopped. The key was not necessary. The door was already open, just a crack. A cold dread, heavier and more complete than anything she had felt in the diner, settled over her. She pushed the door open slowly. "Jamie," she called out, a stupid reflex. Jamie was not here. He would never be here again. The apartment was silent. It was cold. The open door had let in the morning chill. Nothing was stolen. The small, second-hand television was still there. The few dollars she kept in a jar on the counter were untouched. She walked through the tiny living room, into the kitchenette, and then she saw it. On the scarred Formica counter, placed directly in the center, was a photograph. It was an old one. From before the accident, it was her, at a high school picnic, laughing, her head tilted back, her hair longer. The photo had been torn in half. It was not a robbery. It was not a threat. It was a promise. Mick Russo, or someone like him, had been inside her home. He had stood where she was standing. Clara sank to the linoleum floor, the ripped edges of the photograph digging into her palm. She looked at the burner phone Dante Moretti had given her. It was heavy, solid, and terrifying. She had kept her head down. She had tried to stay invisible, but the past had found her. And now, the only person who had offered her any kind of safety was the most dangerous man in Briarwood. Her fingers were numb. The linoleum was cold against her legs, seeping into her jeans. For how long she sat there, staring at the torn image of her own laughing face. She did not know. The sun was fully up now, painting the drab walls of her kitchenette with a weak, gray light. It was the silence that finally moved her, the silence of the apartment, the silence of the building, the silence of a life that had just been irrevocably breached. She looked at the black burner phone in her other hand. It felt like a stone, heavy and cold. Calling him was admitting defeat. It was admitting she could not handle this. That her 4 years of running and hiding had amounted to nothing. It was putting her fate, and more importantly, Jamie's, into the hands of a man who dealt in shadows and violence. But the torn photograph on her counter was not a shadow. It was a statement. I was here. I can get to you. I can get to anything you love. Her thumb found the single button on the side. The screen flared to life, bright and accusing. One contact. D. She pressed call. It did not ring. There was only a single, sharp click, and then silence. She almost thought the call had failed. Yes. His voice was not a question. It was a simple, flat acknowledgement. No. Hello? No. Who is this? He was here, Clara whispered, the words scraping her throat. In my apartment, he left. He left a picture. Torn? Another silence. She could hear nothing on the other end. Not a car, not a breath. It was as if she were speaking into the void. Stay there, he said. Do not move. Do not touch the door. The line clicked dead. She did not know how much time passed. 10 minutes, 20. She remained on the floor, the phone clutched in one hand, the picture in the other. She heard no footsteps in the hall, no sirens. There was just a soft, firm knock on her door. 3 quick raps. She flinched, her heart leaping into her throat. Who is it? It's Dante. Open the door. Clara? His voice was muted through the cheap wood, but it was him. She unfolded herself from the floor, her knees aching. She unlatched the deadbolt, the one Mick or his men had presumably bypassed with ease, and opened the door. He was there, alone. He was not dressed as he had been last night. He wore dark trousers, a simple black knit sweater, and the same wool coat. He looked less like a mafia boss and more like an architect visiting a site on a cold morning. His eyes, dark and intense, were not on her. They were scanning the hallway behind him. He stepped inside, and the small apartment seemed to shrink. The air suddenly charged and thick. He did not comfort her. He did not ask if she was all right. He walked past her, his gaze sweeping the room, taking in every detail. His eyes landed on the kitchenette counter. He walked over, looked down at the torn photograph, but did not touch it. He observed her living room, her threadbare couch, the single bookshelf, the door to her bedroom. He took in the entire scene silently. After a full minute, he turned back to her. Pack a bag, he said. It was not a request. And just like that, the fear that had frozen her bones was replaced by a familiar, stubborn spark of defiance. What? A bag. Clothes for a few days. Whatever you need. We are leaving. I'm not going anywhere, she said, her voice shaking but gaining strength. I cannot just leave. My job, I cannot... Your job at the diner is finished, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. They will not find you there again. Pack. No, she said, and she was surprised by the force of her own voice. I am not one of your employees. I am not some girl you can just order around. I will not be indebted to you. I cannot pay you. I'm not asking for money. Everyone wants something, Mr. Moretti, and I know what men like you want. I will not. He looked at her, really looked at her, and his expression was not angry. It was something else. Calculating. Perhaps even faintly impressed by her refusal. And your brother? He asked, his voice soft. The defiance crumbled. What about him? You said he was safe. He is. For now. But a man who breaks into an apartment can make a phone call. He can find out where Jamie is. He can send someone to that facility. Someone who does not care about visiting hours. The blood drained from her face. This was her deepest, darkest terror. The one that kept her up at night. The one she had pushed away by telling herself Mick did not know, but he did. Or he could. You said you would protect him, she whispered, the accusation clear. I am, Dante said. I am protecting him by removing the target. But if you insist on staying here, in this apartment, you are not a target. You are a victim waiting to happen. And you are putting him at risk. She hated him for saying it. She hated him because he was right. I cannot just leave him, she cried, the tears she had held back finally blurring her vision. I cannot just abandon him. He's all I have. Dante watched her for a moment. He seemed to come to a decision. He pulled his own phone from his pocket, a sleek, modern smartphone. He dialed a number. I'm on my way to Green Valley, he said to the person on the other end. Now, meet me there in 10. I want the head of security and the facility director in the room. He hung up. He looked back at Clara. Get your bag. We're going to see your brother. Clara stared at him, bewildered. What? You are worried about him, so we will go. You will see he is safe, and I will ensure he stays that way. Then, you will come with me. The drive to the Green Valley Rehabilitation Center was silent. Dante drove a large, black sedan that was so quiet it felt like they were gliding. The windows were tinted dark, and the city of Briarwood slid by, anonymous and gray. Clara sat in the passenger seat, her hands clenched around the strap of the small duffel bag she had packed with numb fingers. When they arrived, Dante did not park in the visitor's lot. He drove up a private access road to a side entrance Clara had never used. A man in a suit, not a doctor, was waiting. He nodded at Dante, unlocked the door, and led them through a series of quiet, sterile hallways. They were shown into a small, carpeted conference room. 2 people were already sitting at the table, a nervous-looking man in a suit, the facility director, and a woman with a severe haircut, the head of security. They both stood when Dante entered. Mr. Moretti, the director said, his voice strained. We were not expecting you. I know, Dante said. He did not sit. He gestured to Clara. This is Clara Leone, her brother. Jamie is a patient here. From this moment on, her bills are to be sent directly to my office. Understood? The director blinked. Yes, sir, of course. Furthermore, Dante continued, his voice low and even. No one sees Jamie Leone. No one. Not a friend, not a distant cousin, not a delivery man. His file is to be sealed. The only people who are authorized to see him are the medical staff, myself, and Miss Leone, when she is with me. Is that clear? Sir, the head of security interjected. We have procedures. We cannot just... Dante turned his gaze on her. He did not raise his voice. He did not threaten. He simply looked at her. You will make new procedures. A man is threatening her. That threat now extends to this facility. If one hair on her brother's head is harmed, I will hold you personally responsible. I will buy this facility, and I will tear it down, and you will be in the rubble. Do you understand me? The woman's face went pale. Yes. Yes. Understood. He will be protected. Good, Dante said. Now, Miss Leone would like to see him. The visit was short. A nurse, clearly intimidated, led them to Jamie's room. He was asleep. His room was small, but clean. He looked thin, his face pale against the white pillowcase, but he was breathing peacefully. The machines beside his bed beeped in a steady, reassuring rhythm. Clara stood in the doorway, her hand over her mouth. She wanted to run to him to hold his hand, but she was afraid to wake him, afraid he would see the fear in her eyes. He is safe. Clara, Dante said quietly from behind her. She nodded. A single, jerky motion. She let the nurse lead them back out. This time, when they got in the car, Clara did not protest. She was exhausted. She was defeated. And for the first time in 4 years, a small, treacherous part of her was relieved. She was not driving. Someone else was in control. He did not take her to a house. He drove to the center of the city, to a tall, glittering skyscraper that housed one of his most exclusive clubs on the first 3 floors. He drove into a private underground garage, and they took a private elevator that required a key. The doors opened not into a hallway, but directly into an apartment. It was not an apartment, it was a penthouse. The entire floor. The elevator doors opened onto a vast expanse of dark hardwood and glass. One entire wall was a window, looking out over the entire city of Briarwood, the lights twinkling below them like a fallen constellation. The furniture was minimal, expensive, and cold. Where are we? She whispered. A secure location, Dante said. No one knows this place exists. The elevator is keyed to me. No one comes up here. You will be safe. He showed her to a guest bedroom. It was larger than her entire apartment. It had its own bathroom, stocked with expensive soaps and fluffy white towels. Rest, he said, his voice softer now. There is food in the refrigerator. I have business to attend to. I will be back. He left her there. Clara stood in the middle of the enormous, silent, beautiful cage. She walked to the window. She was so high up, the city looked small, unreal. She felt completely, utterly disconnected from the world. She did not sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed, her duffel bag at her feet, for hours. The first night was the worst. The silence of the penthouse was louder than the noise of her old apartment. There were no sirens, no shouting neighbors, no rattling pipes. There was only the sound of her own breathing and the distant, electronic hum of the climate control. She had not eaten. She had not unpacked. The adrenaline that had kept her going for the last 24 hours had finally receded, leaving behind a raw, gaping void. And into that void, the panic came. It started as it always did, a tightness in her chest, a feeling that she could not get enough air. She stood up, pacing the plush carpet of the guest room. The city lights outside the window seemed to spin, pressing in on her. She was trapped. She had run from Mick Russo only to be locked in a gilded cage by Dante Moretti. She was a pawn, a piece of property, a liability. Her breathing hitched. She gasped, but it felt like sucking air through a straw. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, trapped animal. Black spots danced in her vision. She stumbled out of the bedroom, into the massive, dark living room, searching for, she did not know what, an exit, air. She slid down the floor-to-ceiling window, the cold glass a shock against her back. She curled her knees to her chest, buried her face in her arms, and tried to disappear. She was hyperventilating, the sobs catching in her throat as painful, choking sounds. The elevator chimed. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with terror. The stainless steel doors slid open. Dante stepped out. He had changed into a fresh shirt, but his hair was slightly disheveled, and he looked tired. He saw her instantly, curled on the floor, a trembling wreck. He did not move. He did not rush to her. He did not say, "Are you okay?" He simply stood there, by the elevator, his presence filling the dark room. He watched her, his expression unreadable in the shadows. He was distant, but he was present. He walked, not to her, but to the kitchen. She heard the sound of a cupboard opening, the rush of water. He came back holding a glass of water. He did not crouch down, which she was grateful for. He did not loom. He placed the glass on the floor, a few feet away from her. "Breathe." "Clara," he said, his voice a low, calm command, not gentle, but steady. "You are safe here. No one can get to you." I cannot breathe," she gasped, shaking her head. "It is too... I am..." "You're having a panic attack," he said, his voice devoid of pity. It was a statement of fact. "It will pass. Focus on your breathing. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 6. He did not say it again. He walked over to one of the large leather armchairs that faced the window, but he did not sit. He just stood beside it, his back to the city, and watched her. He was giving her space, but he was not leaving her alone. It took a long time, minutes, maybe an hour, but his presence, solid and unwavering, acted as an anchor. The fact that he was not fussing over her, not touching her, allowed her to focus. Slowly, the frantic rhythm of her heart slowed, the black spots faded. She was able to draw one, deep, shuddering breath. She reached for the water, her hand shaking. She drank it all. She did not look at him. She was too embarrassed. He had seen her at her absolute lowest. Finally, Her body exhausted, she uncurled. She did not have the strength to get up and go to the bedroom. She simply lay down on the thick rug, pulling a decorative throw blanket from the nearby sofa over her. She expected him to leave, to go to his own room. He did not. He sat down in the armchair. He did not read. He did not turn on a light. He just sat in the dark, watching over her. Clara closed her eyes, and for the first time in 4 years, protected by the most dangerous man she had ever met, she fell asleep. The next few days settled into a strange, unreal routine. Clara tried to keep her emotional distance. She stayed in her room, reading books she found on the shelves, or she sat by the window, watching the city she could no longer walk in. Dante was a ghost. He would be there in the morning, drinking coffee and reading the paper. And then he would be gone, disappearing down the elevator. He would return late at night, and they would sit in the vast, quiet living room, 2 strangers sharing a prison. But she found herself drawn to his quiet intensity. He never asked her questions. He never demanded anything of her. He would simply state facts. "You are eating," he said one evening, noticing she had finished the meal he had left for her. "I was hungry," she replied defensively. "Good." And yet, the threat from the outside world was growing. Mick Russo was not a man to be forgotten. One afternoon, Dante returned earlier than usual. He placed a small, white envelope on the coffee table. "This was sent to the diner," he said. Clara's blood ran cold. She picked it up. Inside was a simple, printed note. "I know where the bird is singing. The cage will not hold her for long." She looked at him, terrified. "He knows I am with you. He knows I am protecting you," Dante corrected. "It makes him bold and stupid. He has also been making inquiries at Green Valley." Her breath hitched. "Jamie?" "He did not get in," Dante said quickly. "My men are there. The facility is locked down, but he is testing the fences." The note, the escalation, it broke something in her. The wall she had built between them. That night, she told him everything. They were sitting in the living room, the city lights painting them in blue and gold. "His name is Mick Russo," she started, her voice barely a whisper. "But I knew him before. Years ago. I was 16. Stupid. My mother had just died, and I was lost." Dante just listened, his expression unchanged, but his focus was entirely on her. "He ran a ring. He found girls like me, lost girls, runaways. He would be kind at first, buy you food, tell you were special. He groomed us. He was a trafficker. He would get girls hooked on drugs, then sell them to other men." She was shaking, but she could not stop. The words were pouring out, a confession she had held for 8 years. "I was lucky. I saw what happened to another girl. I ran. I went to the police. I testified. I told them everything. Gave them names. Places." "What happened?" Dante asked, his voice low. "They shut part of it down," she said, a bitter laugh escaping her. "They made a few arrests, but Mick, he walked. The case was buried. A detective told me, off the record, that Russo had powerful friends. A few months later, my testimony was lost in an evidence fire. And then, 4 years ago, Jamie's hit and run." She looked at him, her eyes pleading for him to understand. "It was not an accident. Dante, it was him. It was Mick, reminding me to stay silent, reminding me what he could take." Dante said nothing for a long time. The muscle in his jaw was ticking, the only sign of the rage she could feel radiating from him. "He took your brother's legs," Dante said, his voice a low growl. "And he buried your testimony. He will not bury this." It was 2 nights later that she broke. She had found a small box in the back of her duffel bag, a digital video recorder, old and bulky. On it was the last home video she had, from the Christmas before the accident. She plugged it into the penthouse's massive television, and there he was, Jamie, 17, lanky, and grinning, wearing a ridiculous reindeer antler headband. He was walking, he was running, actually chasing their cat around the living room of their old apartment. He mugged for the camera, his voice bright and clear. "Come on, Clara, stop filming and help me." Clara sat on the floor, her hand pressed to her mouth, and a sound was torn from her. A raw, animal noise of such profound grief it surprised her. She began to sob, not the quiet, fearful tears she had cried before, but wrenching, body-shaking sobs that came from the deepest part of her soul. It was grief for her brother's stolen future. It was guilt for her own survival. It was the crushing weight of 8 years of terror. She did not hear the elevator. She did not hear him approach. She just suddenly felt his presence beside her. Dante knelt on the floor next to her. On the screen, Jamie was laughing. Dante did not speak. He just watched the screen for a moment, his face hard. Then he looked at Clara, who was curled into a ball, trying to muffle her cries. He did not pat her shoulder. He did not offer empty platitudes. He slid one arm around her back, the other under her legs, and lifted her as if she weighed nothing. He carried her to the sofa. He sat down and he held her. He held her as she wept into his chest, her fists clutching the front of his expensive shirt. He did not recoil. He just held her, solid and warm, one hand pressing firmly, reassuringly against her back. He was not her boss. He was not a mafia kingpin. He was just a man, holding a woman who was breaking apart, and in his embrace, she felt something she had not felt in years. He understood. He understood grief. Her sobs finally quieted. She was empty, exhausted, her face pressed against the warm column of his throat. He smelled like expensive soap and cold night air. She pulled back, just enough to look at him. His eyes were dark, and for the first time, she saw something other than intensity. She saw empathy. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice raw. "Do not be," he murmured. Their faces were inches apart. The air between them was electric, thruming with the shared grief, the vulnerability. He looked at her mouth, and she felt her breath catch. He leaned in, slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She did not. His lips met hers. It was not a kiss of passion, not at first. It was a kiss of shared sorrow. It was slow, and gentle, and deeply, emotionally intense. His lips were soft, hesitant. It was a question. She answered by tilting her head, her hand coming up to rest on his chest. His heart was beating a steady, strong rhythm beneath her palm. The kiss deepened. It became something more. The gentleness was still there, but beneath it was a current of electricity, a spark of life in the midst of all that darkness. He tasted like coffee and something uniquely him. His hand moved from her back to her hair, his fingers threading through it, holding her head as he angled his own. He broke the kiss, resting his forehead against hers. He was breathing heavily. "Clara," he whispered, her name a prayer on his lips. She looked into his eyes, and she was not afraid. She felt seen. She let him touch her. His hand moved from her hair, down her neck, tracing the line of her collarbone. His touch was reverent, careful, as if she were made of spun glass and he was terrified she might break. He kissed her again, his other hand sliding around her waist, pulling her closer until she was practically in his lap. It was not rushed. It was not desperate. It was a slow, deliberate exploration. It was the touch of a man who had been starved of tenderness, and the response of a woman who had been starved of safety. It was gentle, and it was electric, and it was more real than anything she had felt in years. Afterward, long after the television had gone dark, they lay on the sofa, her head on his chest. The silence was back. But it was a different kind of silence. It was shared. And then, the fear returned. Clara pulled away, sitting up. The cold air of the penthouse rushed in to fill the space he had occupied. He looked at her, his expression questioning, the tenderness still in his eyes. She stood up and walked to the window, wrapping her arms around herself. What had she done? She had just given herself to the one man who was as dangerous as the man she was hiding from. She had sought comfort and found complication. She could not trust this. She could not trust him. He was a killer. He was a monster who owned the city. And she had just let him see every broken piece of her. "Clara?" he asked, his voice rough. She kept her back to him. I think I should go to my room. I am tired." She did not wait for a reply. She fled, locking the door to her guest room, her heart hammering for a different reason. She slid down the door, pressing her back against it, and she finally understood. She was not afraid of Mick Russo anymore. She was terrified of Dante Moretti, not because he would hurt her, but because she was starting to trust him. And in her world, trust was a luxury that always got you killed. The silence in the penthouse had a weight to it, a heavy, sterile quality that Clara found more oppressive than the constant low-level noise of her old apartment. After 2 weeks, she felt less like a protected guest and more like a rare bird in a very expensive cage. The night she had pulled away from Dante, she had created a new, unspoken boundary. They coexisted, they were polite. But the raw, emotional current that had sparked between them was buried under a thick layer of unspoken tension. "I cannot just sit here," she told him one morning, her voice stronger than she expected. "I cannot just watch the city and wait for someone to try and kill me. I need to work." Dante had looked up from a stack of financial ledgers, his dark eyes assessing her. She expected him to refuse. She expected him to tell her it was too dangerous. "There is a restaurant, Senior," he said instead, his voice flat. "Il Corvo. It is one of mine. It is in the financial district, high-end. The clientele is controlled." He paused. "You will be a hostess. You will use the name Anna Bianchi. You will be driven there and back every evening. You will not leave the building for any reason. A car will be waiting for you at the service entrance at precisely 11:30. It was not freedom. Not really. It was a longer leash. But it was something. Working, as Anna felt like putting on a costume. Il Corvo was a world of hushed voices, gleaming silverware, and patrons who wore their wealth like armor. Clara, now Anna, wore a simple, elegant black dress, her hair pulled back in a sleek chignon. Her job was to smile, to check reservations on a small, discreet tablet, and to lead billionaires and their wives to tables shrouded in intimate shadows. She was good at it, the same skills that had allowed her to navigate the volatile regulars at Mel's, reading a mood, de-escalating tension with a glance, becoming invisible when necessary, made her an exemplary hostess, and for 6 hours a night. She was not Clara Leone, the girl in hiding. She was Anna Bianchi, the composed, untouchable woman at the door. She earned a paycheck, wired to a new bank account Dante had opened for her. It was not much, but it was hers. She was regaining a sliver of her independence, but the world Dante inhabited did not stay quiet for long. Word was spreading. Even in the opulent bubble of Il Corvo, she heard whispers. 2 of Dante's men, captains by the look of their suits, were at the bar one night, their voices low and angry. They thought Anna was just part of the decor. "He's soft," one of them, a man with a heavy jaw, muttered into his whiskey. "This girl, he's protecting a nobody waitress. It is making him weak. It is making him a target." "Vittorio," the other replied. "The shipment from the docks, he delayed it. For her, because the security detail was needed somewhere else. He's putting his heart before the familia." Clara's hands tightened on the tablet. A shipment, security detail, because of her. The whispers followed her back to the penthouse. The guilt was a physical ache, settling low in her stomach. She was a liability. She was the weakness they all saw. A few nights later, the whispers became a roar. She was in the penthouse living room, unable to sleep, staring at the city lights. The elevator chimed, but it was not the main car. It was the sound of the private elevator that connected the penthouse to the office Dante kept on the floor directly below. She heard voices. One was Dante's, low and controlled. The other was the man from the bar, Vittorio, and he was not low or controlled. He was yelling, drawn by a fear she could not name. Clara crept to the stairwell that connected the 2 floors, a door she had never opened. She cracked it open. The voices, clearer now, drifted up. "A $3 million weapons shipment, Dante, delayed because you needed to move 2 men to watch a rehab center. This is not business, this is madness," Vittorio was shouting. "The shipment is insured." Dante's voice was ice. "It can be replaced. And the girl, can she be replaced?" There was a heavy, dangerous silence. Clara held her breath. "You will lower your voice in my home." "Vittorio," Dante said, and the sudden drop in temperature was palpable. "My decisions are final. The girl's safety is a priority. That shipment is a priority. I am handling both." "You are handling her! You mean," Vittorio spat. "The other families, they see this. They see you putting a skirt before our interests. It is a weakness, boss, and weakness gets us all killed." "Get out," Dante said. "Dante, get out!" Clara heard a chair scrape, a door slam, and then silence. She closed the door to the stairs, her heart hammering. She felt sick, a weapons shipment, a rehab center. He was prioritizing her. And, in his world, that kind of priority was not a kindness. It was a declaration, and it was putting them all in danger. The call came 2 nights later. She was getting ready for her shift at Il Corvo, applying the Anna Bianchi mask of neutral red lipstick. The burner phone, the one she kept hidden in her bag, vibrated. It had not made a sound in weeks. An unknown number. Her hand trembled as she answered. "Hello? Clara girl?" Her blood evaporated. It was Mick Russo. "Took me a while to find this number." His voice oozed through the speaker, oily and familiar. "You have been a busy little bird, flying high now. Are you? In Moretti's fancy cage. What do you want?" "Mick," she said, her voice a reedy whisper. "What I have always wanted, you, but you are difficult. So I thought I might go see a friend. You know, just to talk. Jamie, that is his name, right? Nice place he is in. Green Valley, lots of windows, lots of access." "You cannot get in," she hissed, panic clawing at her throat. "Dante, he has men. It is locked down." Mick laughed, a wet, ugly sound. "Oh, sweetheart, men are just men. They get hungry, they get sloppy, or they get paid. I just wanted you to know. I am thinking about him, thinking about how easy it would be to visit. Maybe I will wait until that nurse he likes. The pretty blonde one is on her shift. Maybe I will just send a message." "Leave him alone," she screamed. "He is a child. He's not part of this. He is part of you, Clara, and that is all that matters. You tell your new boyfriend to back off, or I am going to show Jamie what gravity looks like." The line clicked dead. She did not think. She did not call Dante. All she could see was Jamie's face. All she could hear was Mick's laugh. She was the liability. She was the one who had brought this. She grabbed her coat, her purse. She ran to the elevator, her hands shaking so badly she could barely press the button for the garage. She could not use Dante's driver. Not for this. She had to go. She ran out of the garage, onto the street, and flagged the first cab she saw. Green Valley Rehabilitation Center, on the west side. "Please, hurry." The drive was a blur of self-loathing. She'd been so stupid rushing to the site. It was exactly what he wanted. It was a lure. She knew it, but she could not stop. She had to see. She had to know he was safe. She paid the driver with a crumpled bill and ran through the front doors of the center. The lobby was quiet. The security guard at the desk looked up, bored. "I'm here to see Jamie Leone," she said, breathless. The guard checked his list. "He is not cleared for visitors." "I am his sister, Clara. Anna, I am his sister." "I am sorry, ma'am. My list says no one." "Please," she begged, tears welling. Just tell me he is okay. Please. Someone threatened him. Is he okay?" The guard, seeing her panic, softened. He picked up his phone. "Nurse station, 3 West. You got eyes on Leone?" "Yeah, okay, thanks." He hung up. "He is fine. Ma'am, nurse just checked on him. He is asleep." Relief. So potent it made her knees weak. Washed over her. He was fine. Mick was just threatening her. He had not done anything. She thanked the guard, her voice trembling, and pushed back out into the cold night. She'd been so stupid. Dante would be furious. She pulled out the burner phone to call for a car. She stepped off the main sidewalk, into the small, shadowed alley that led to the patient pickup area, hoping it would be faster. That was a stupid move. "Clara girl." She froze. A man stepped out from behind a dumpster. It was not Mick. This man was taller, leaner, and his face was a mask of cold professionalism. He held a knife, the blade gleaming under the weak yellow security light. "Mick is tired of playing games," the man said, advancing on her. "He just wants to prove a point, to you and to Moretti." Clara backed away, her hand fumbling in her purse. "Dante will kill you." "Dante is not here," the man sneered. He lunged. Clara screamed, throwing her purse at his head. It was a stupid, reflexive action, but it bought her a second. He swiped with the knife, catching the sleeve of her coat, slicing the fabric. She ran, but the alley was a dead end, blocked by a high chain-link fence. She was trapped. She turned, her back hitting the cold metal. The man advanced, smiling now. Nowhere to run. He raised the knife. A pair of headlights flooded the alley, so bright they were blinding. A black sedan screeched to a halt, blocking the entrance. The passenger door flew open. Dante Moretti got out. He was not wearing a coat, just a white shirt. The sleeves rolled up his forearms. He had not been coming from a meeting. He had been coming for her. "Get away from her," he said. His voice was not loud. It was a low, guttural rumble. The man with the knife hesitated, blinded. "Who the hell are you?" Dante did not answer. He moved. He was fast, impossibly fast. He crossed the alley in 3 long strides. The man swiped with the knife. Dante moved his head, the blade missing by an inch. He grabbed the man's wrist, and Clara heard a wet, sickening snap. The man screamed, a high, thin sound, as the knife clattered to the pavement. Clara shrank against the fence, her hands over her mouth. Dante did not stop. This was not the calm, composed man who drank espresso. This was not the tender man who had held her. This was a demon. He drove his fist into the man's stomach. The man doubled over, gasping. Dante grabbed him by the hair, yanking his head back, and slammed his fist into the man's face. Once, twice, a third time. It was not a fight. It was a beating. It was brutal and personal and terrifyingly silent on Dante's part. The only sounds were the sickening, wet impacts of his fists and the choked, broken sobs of the man. 2 more cars pulled up. 4 of Dante's men piled out, guns drawn. They stopped, seeing their boss. "Boss," one of them yelled. "Dante, he is done. He is finished." Dante did not seem to hear. He had the man pinned against the brick wall, his left hand around his throat, his right fist bloody and rising again. "Dante!" Clara screamed, her voice tearing. He froze. His fist, covered in another man's blood, was trembling in the air. He slowly, very slowly lowered his arm. He looked at the man he was holding up, a broken, bloody mess, and his face was a mask of pure, cold rage. He dropped him. The man crumpled to the pavement like a sack of garbage. Dante stood there for a second, his chest heaving. He did not look at Clara. He turned to his men. "Get her. Take him. Clean this up." He walked past her, his face a stone, and got back in the car. They rode back to the penthouse in total, suffocating silence. Clara sat in the back of a different car, one of his men driving. Dante was in the car ahead. She was shaking so hard she thought her teeth would crack. When they got to the penthouse, the elevator opening into the silent, dark living room, she stood by the window, her arms wrapped around herself, watching the city. She heard him in the kitchen, the sound of water running. He appeared in the doorway to the living room, drying his hands on a towel. His knuckles were raw and split, but clean. His white shirt had a dark splash of blood on the cuff. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice rough. She shook her head. "He cut my coat." Dante's jaw tightened. He walked toward her, and she flinched. She could not help it. She had just seen him destroy a man. He stopped, his face twisting. He looked down at his own hands as if he did not recognize them. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice quiet. "Sorry," she said, her voice shaking with adrenaline and a sudden, sharp anger. "Sorry for what? For saving me, or for that? What was that? Dante?" "I'm sorry you were hurt," he clarified, his voice flat. "I'm sorry he got to you. I should have had a man on you. I should have known you would run." The anger spiked. "A man on me? You mean a guard? A babysitter? You think this is my fault?" "This is not about fault," he shot back, his voice finally rising. He took a step closer. and this time she did not flinch. "This is about you ignoring every rule I set to keep you alive. You ran, Clara, you ran into the one place he knew you would go, without me, without a call. He threatened my brother," she screamed, the tears finally coming, hot and angry. "He said he was going to kill Jamie. What was I supposed to do? Sit here and wait for you to handle it? I am a liability, remember? I heard you. I heard Vittorio. I am the weakness that is going to get you all killed." "You are not a weakness," he roared, and the force of it silenced her. He was in front of her now, his hands clenched at his sides. You are the only thing. You are not a weakness." "Then what am I?" she whispered, the tears streaming down her face. "What am I to you, Dante? A project? A debt you think you owe?" "You are alive," he said, his voice cracking with an emotion she had never heard from him. He gripped her arms, his fingers digging in. "That is what you are, and I am trying to keep you that way." The raw emotion, the desperation in his face, it broke the dam. They were standing inches apart, trembling with the aftermath of violence and fear. "I was so scared," she sobbed. "I saw him, and I saw you." "He will not touch you again," Dante growled, his face softening with a terrible pain. "He will never touch you." He pulled her against him. It was not gentle. It was a collision. His mouth found hers, and it was not a kiss of tenderness. It was desperate. It was intense. It was a raw, primal need to erase the violence, to reaffirm life. His lips were hard, demanding, and she met his force with her own. She clung to him, her fingers digging into his back, as if he were the only solid thing in a collapsing world. This was not the careful exploration on the sofa. This was real. This was fire and rage and a desperate, shared need. He kissed her like he was drowning, like she was the only air. He backed her against the cold glass of the window, his body pressing her in, claiming her. She ripped at the buttons of his bloody shirt, needing to feel his skin, to prove he was real, that this was real. He lifted her, and she wrapped her legs around his waist, their mouths never breaking contact. It was messy and frantic, and it was the most real thing she had ever felt. Later, they were on the thick rug, the city lights their only illumination. They were breathing hard, their limbs tangled, the adrenaline slowly draining, leaving them hollowed out. He lay on his back, staring at the ceiling. Clara was beside him, her head on his shoulder. The silence was different this time. It was not tense. It was, heavy. "My sister," he said. His voice so quiet she barely heard it. She turned her head, looking at his profile. "Her name was Sophia," he said, his voice flat. "Dead. She was 12 years old. I was 16. He was silent for a long time, and she did not push. She just waited. "My father, he had enemies. He always had enemies. He told me to watch her. We were in the park. It was a Tuesday. I was supposed to be watching her." His voice thickened. "I turned my back. For 1 minute, just 1 minute, I was looking at a girl, trying to be a man, and when I turned back, she was gone." Clara's hand found his, her fingers lacing with his. His skin was cold. "They never found her?" he whispered. "No note, no ransom, she just vanished. My father, he never forgave me. I never forgave myself." He turned his head, and his eyes, dark and filled with a grief so old it was part of him, met hers. "I have been looking for her my whole life. Clara, in every crowd, in every new city, every time I failed, and when I saw that man with his knife, all I could see was him taking you, and I could not, I will not, let that happen again." Clara finally understood. She saw the rage, the violence, the cold control. It was not cruelty. It was a shield. It was the armor of a 16-year-old boy who had failed, and who had spent the rest of his life making sure he would never fail again. She rose up on one elbow, her hair falling around her face. She looked down at this dangerous, broken man. She did not say, "It was not your fault." She did not say, "You have to let it go." She just leaned down and kissed his forehead, then his cheek, then his lips softly, tenderly. "You are not him," she whispered, "and I am not her. You are here. I am here. We are safe." He did not reply. He just pulled her down, wrapping his arm around her, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe, as the city grew more dangerous, as the shadows gathered. Clara Leone lay in the arms of Dante Moretti, and for the first time in her entire life, she felt completely, undeniably safe. The revelation of his past had changed the air between them. The penthouse, once a silent, sterile prison, now felt like a fortress. But the peace was a thin veneer over a tension that hummed, low and constant. The danger that had brought them together was still circling. Dante had become more guarded, not with her, but with his organization. He spent long hours in the office below, the one connected by the private stairs. He was often on the phone, his voice a low, lethal murmur of Italian that Clara did not understand, but the tone of which she recognized as barely contained fury. "Mick knew where to find you," he said one evening. He was standing by the window, his back to her, a tumbler of whiskey in his hand. He knew the exact time to call the burner phone. He knew about Jamie's nurse. Clara, who had been reading on the sofa, put her book down. "What are you saying?" "I am saying he has help," Dante said, turning. His face was hard in the twilight. "Someone inside my organization is feeding him information. Someone is leaking. Who? I do not know, but all signs point to one man." He took a drink, the ice clinking. Luca. The name shocked her. Luca was his consigliere, the older, quiet man who was always at Dante's side in the few business meetings she had inadvertently seen. He was Dante's right hand, his father's right hand before him. He was family. "You cannot be serious," Clara said. "He seems so loyal. In our world, loyalty is just a mask worn by the patient," Dante said, his voice bitter. "Luca is the only one, other than me, who had the access codes to the Green Valley security file. He knew the name of the nurse. He knew about this penthouse. The thought of the older man, with his kind eyes and sad smile, betraying Dante, and made Clara feel cold. It proved what she already knew. This world was built on quicksand. A few days later, Dante was gone. A day trip to Chicago. He had said, "Urgent business," for the first time. He left her alone in the penthouse with 2 guards, silent and imposing, stationed outside the elevator on the floor below. The silence was deafening, restless, and feeling a prickle of uneased to. Clara found herself wandering. She went down the private stairs to his office, a place she had never entered. It was not locked. It was immaculate. A massive mahogany desk, shelves of leather-bound books that looked unread, and a wall of shaded windows. It smelled like him, like sandalwood, whiskey, and something metallic. She ran her hand along the desk, her fingers tracing the grain of the wood. She was not looking for anything in particular. She was just looking for him. On a side table, next to a heavy crystal decanter, was a cluster of framed photographs. Most were of his parents, formal and stern, but one, in a simple silver frame, was tucked behind the others. She picked it up. It was a girl. She was standing on a beach, her dark hair whipped back by the wind, a bright, gap-toothed smile on her face. She looked to be about 12, maybe 13. She was wearing a simple yellow sundress. It was his sister, Sophia. Clara's breath hitched. It was not just a resemblance. It was eerie. The shape of the eyes, the line of the jaw, the stubborn set of her chin under that wide smile. It was like looking at a younger, happier version of herself, hauntingly similar. The key turned in the elevator lock. Clara jumped, her heart slamming against her ribs. She almost dropped the frame. She put it back, her hands fumbling, just as the elevator doors to the penthouse chimed open above her. She hurried back up the stairs, her mind reeling. He was standing in the living room, shrugging off his coat. He looked tired. "You are back early," she said, her voice sounding unnaturally high. "The meeting was shorter than I expected." He stopped, looking at her. He had an unnerving ability to read her. "What is it? You look pale." The question was on her lips before she could stop it. "I was in your office." His expression did not change, but his eyes hardened slightly. "And I saw the picture of Sophia." He went very still. You should not have been in there. Why are you protecting me, Dante? She blurted, the words tumbling out, fueled by the doubt she had been suppressing. Is this about me, or is it about her? Do I just look like her? The question hung in the air between them, ugly and raw. He stared at her for a long, unbearable moment. The silence stretched, filled with all the things he was not saying. You are not her, he said finally, his voice flat. That is not an answer, she cried, her voice cracking. She hated the desperation in it. I need to know. Am I just a ghost you are trying to save? Am I your penance? He took a step toward her, his face a mask of conflict. It does not matter why. It matters to me, she said, tears of frustration stinging her eyes. I deserve to know if what happened between us was real, or if you were just pretending I was her. Never, he growled, his voice low and dangerous. He grabbed her arm, his fingers biting. Do not ever say that. What is between us is not about her. Then tell me, she pleaded. Tell me I am not just a replacement. He looked at her, his jaw working, the muscle ticking. She could see the war behind his eyes, the need to keep his armor, and the desire to tell her the truth. He did not answer directly. He could not. His past was too strong. Instead, he let go of her arm. Go to work, Anna, he said, his voice suddenly weary, the anger gone. We will talk tonight. I will explain. He turned and walked away, leaving her in the middle of the living room. Her heart shattered. He had not denied it. Clara went to work in a daze. Her shift at Il Corvo was a fog of polite smiles and muted conversations. He does not answer directly. The non-answer was worse than a lie. It was a confirmation. She was a stand-in for his sister, a project to ease his 16-year-old guilt. The safety she had felt, the intimacy she had shared, it all felt dirty, stolen. At 11:30, she walked out the service entrance, just as she always did. The black sedan was waiting. The same driver, a stoic man named Tony, nodded at her and opened the back door. She slid in. The door closed. The locks clicked. Wait, she said, a sudden, cold prickle of fear. The man in the driver's seat turned. It was not Tony. It was Mick Russo. His smile was a yellow slash in the darkness of the car. Hello, Clara girl. Your chariot awaits. She lunged for the door handle, but it was useless. The child safety locks were on. He hit a button, and a dark privacy screen slid up, sealing them in. Scream! He goaded her, putting the car in gear and pulling smoothly away from the curb. No one can hear you. Moretti's car. Nice, right? Soundproof. All his men have the same model. Easy to get a spare key, if you know who to ask. Luca, the leak was not just information. It was access. What do you want, Mick? She said, trying to keep the terror from her voice. Simple. A trade, he said, his eyes flicking to her in the rearview mirror. That weapons shipment your boyfriend is so fond of, he's going to give it to me. And in return, I am going to give him, you, maybe. The car sped up, heading toward the abandoned industrial side of town. They drove for 20 minutes, her mind racing. She was not the same girl from the diner. She was not the girl who froze. She had lived with a monster. She had learned from him. She watched Mick, her eyes scanning the car. She looked for a weapon for an escape. He parked in a dark, crumbling warehouse by the river. He pulled her out, his hand clamped on her arm, and dragged her inside. The place smelled of rust, dead fish, and mold. He shoved her into a small, windowless room, a utility closet, or a cold storage unit. There was a single, bare bulb overhead, swinging from a wire. Dante will kill you, she spat. He has to find you first, Mick sneered. He gestured to the two men who had been waiting inside. They were rough, not like Dante's polished soldiers. Watch her. If she moves, break her legs. I'm going to make a phone call. He slammed the heavy metal door, and she heard a bolt slide home. She was alone with the two guards. One was large, beefy, and silent. He stood by the door. The other was younger, wiry and visibly nervous. He kept sniffing, his eyes darting around. Clara took a breath. No second chances. Dante's voice. I do not waste my time on people who will not help themselves. She focused on the younger one. He was the weak link. She let out a small, quiet sob, sinking to the floor in the corner, pulling her knees to her chest. "Shut up," the big one grunted. I am sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. I am so cold, and I need the bathroom." "Hold it," the big one said. "Please," she whispered, looking at the younger one. Her eyes were wide, filled with tears. She was Clara from the diner now. Helpless. I cannot. I am sick." The younger one looked at the big one. "Let her go. There's a bucket in the hall. What is the harm?" The big one sighed, annoyed. "Fine, you take her, and you be quick." The younger one pulled a key, unlocked the bolt, and grabbed her arm. "Come on." He dragged her out into a dark, concrete hallway. He shoved her toward a disgusting bucket in the corner. "Hurry up!" He turned his back, giving her a small, pathetic amount of privacy. "Now." Clara did not hesitate. She picked up a loose brick from a crumbling pile of debris on the floor. It was heavy. I think I'm going to be sick," she whispered. He sighed and turned back. "I said hurry." She swung the brick with all her strength. It connected with the side of his head with a sickening, wet thud. He did not make a sound. He just collapsed, his eyes rolling back. She almost threw up, but she did not. She grabbed the key from his belt and ran, not for the main warehouse, but deeper, looking for another way out. The big guard was shouting, "Marco, what is going on?" She found a ventilation shaft, the grate already rusted and hanging by one hinge. She kicked it open and scrambled inside. It was dark, and it smelled like death, but it led somewhere. She crawled for what felt like an eternity, the metal biting into her knees. She could hear them shouting behind her, the sound of the big one trying to follow, his bulk too large for the shaft. She fell out of the duct, into an adjoining bay. She was covered in filth and sobbing for breath. She had escaped, but not far. She ran for the main loading door, a sliver of moonlight showing under it. "Going somewhere, bitch." A hand grabbed her hair, yanking her back so hard her neck snapped. It was Mick. He had been waiting by the exit. He threw her to the concrete floor. She landed hard, the air knocked out of her. "You are just like her, you know," he sneered. Pulling a gun from his waistband, he crouched down, his face inches from hers, his breath hot and sour. "My little runaway, the one who got away. But you are not getting away." He raised the gun, pressing the cold metal to her forehead. "Clara." The sound of his voice was not a shout. It was a roar. Mick looked up, his eyes wide. Just as the main warehouse doors exploded inward, it was not a rescue. It was an invasion. Dante was there. He was framed by the headlights of two sedans, a silhouette of pure, unadulterated rage. He was not wearing a coat. He held a gun in each hand. It was brutal. It was fast. Dante's men, a dozen of them, poured in, moving with terrifying military precision. The warehouse erupted in a storm of gunfire. Mick's men were not soldiers. They were thugs. They were cut down. Clara scrambled backward, pressing herself against a stack of pallets. It was all over in less than 30 seconds. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the drip of water and the groan of wounded metal. Several men were dead. Dante was standing in the middle of the room, his gun still raised, his chest heaving. He was scanning. "Clara!" he shouted. "I am here," she cried, her voice breaking. He saw her. His face, which had been a mask of cold fury, crumpled. He dropped the guns. They clattered to the floor. He ran to her. He did not ask if she was okay. He did not say a word. He just fell to his knees in front of her, pulling her into his arms, burying his face in her filthy, matted hair. His entire body was shaking. Clara wrapped her arms around his neck, her face pressed against his, and she began to cry. She was not crying from fear. She was not crying from the violence or from the bodies on the floor. She was crying from the overwhelming, staggering realization that had hit her the moment he burst through the doors. He had come. When she had doubted him, when she had hated him, when she had believed she was just a ghost to him, he had still come. He had torn the city apart to find her. He had come for her, without hesitation. Back at the penthouse, the sun was beginning to rise. The world outside the window was turning a bruised shade of purple and gray. They had not spoken. His men had driven them back in silence. He had led her into the guest bathroom, turned on the shower, and methodically, tenderly, washed the grime, the blood, and the filth from her skin. He had toweled her dry as if she were a child, his hands gentle, his knuckles, which were split and bleeding from a fight she had not even seen, staining the white towel. He had dressed her in one of his own shirts. Now, they were in the living room. He sat on the sofa. She stood in front of him. The adrenaline was gone, leaving only a hollow, echoing stillness. She looked at him, at this man who had just killed for her, the man who could not answer her simplest question. She realized, in that moment, she did not need him to. His answer had been the explosion of those warehouse doors. His answer was in the tremor she could still feel in his hands. Clara took the lead. She knelt in front of him. She took his bloody hands in hers, turned them over, and pressed her lips to his bruised knuckles. A single tear, her last one, fell onto his skin. He watched her, his eyes dark, filled with a terrible, silent gratitude. She rose, and she pulled him to his feet. She led him, not to his bed, but to hers, the one in the guest room, her space. She pushed him gently onto the mattress and climbed in after him. This time, it was not the desperate, frantic collision of before. It was not the sorrow-drenched exploration. It was tender, and it was silent. She made love to him. She took control, her movements slow, deliberate and sure. It was a claiming. She was not his project. She was not his penance. She was his partner. Her hands moved over his skin, learning the scars on his back, the tension in his shoulders. She kissed him. A long, slow kiss that was not about passion, but about possession. A mutual ownership. And he let her. He gave himself over to her, his own hands gentle, stroking her hair, her back, as if she were the one who needed saving. He was grounded, and she was anchoring him. Afterward, they did not speak. They just held each other in the dark. The city woke up below them, but in the penthouse, there was only the sound of two people breathing in unison. A few days later, Dante was in his office. He was looking at a board, a complex diagram of names and connections. Luca's betrayal had run deep. Clara, dressed in clean sweats, came in carrying 2 cups of coffee. She put one on his desk. He looked up, surprised. She had not come in here since... She looked at the board. "You are looking at it all wrong," she said, her voice quiet. He raised an eyebrow. "You're looking for a soldier," she said, pointing to the names. "You're looking for who is strong enough to betray you. You should be looking for who is weak enough to be bought." She pointed to a different name, a cousin, a man Dante had always overlooked. Vittorio was loud, Luca was obvious. But this one, Enzo. He has gambling debts. He lost a shipment last month. You covered for him, did not you? Dante stared at her, then at the board. He had been blinded by his rage at Luca. He had not seen the quieter, more insidious threat. Clara sipped her coffee. "You surround yourself with soldiers. Dante, soldiers follow orders, but they have no loyalty. They just have a boss. You do not need soldiers. You need believers." He looked at her, and for the first time, the admiration in his eyes was not mixed with guilt or sorrow. It was pure. He was surprised. Yes, but more than that, he was impressed. He pulled out the chair at his desk. "Sit," he said. She sat. He pulled up another chair, and together they began to reorganize his entire team. She was no longer a liability. She was no longer a ghost. She was a queen. And she was helping her king rebuild his entire crumbling kingdom. The office had become their sanctuary. In the weeks after the warehouse, after Dante had torn down and rebuilt his entire security apparatus, the penthouse had become a true fortress. But it was the office below, with its wall of data and its lines of secure phones, where Clara truly felt her power. She'd not been a victim in that warehouse. She'd been a survivor, and now she was an analyst. She'd spent the last 2 weeks buried in the data that Dante's men had seized from Luca's home, trying to find the root of the leak. Luca, the old consigliere, was in a hole so deep the sun would never find him, but his betrayal still bothered her. It was too simple. "It is not here," she said, not looking up as Dante entered the office, a cup of coffee in his hand for her. He stood beside her desk, the one they now shared. "What is not here?" "The motive," she said, tapping the screen of a laptop. "Luca sold you out. We know this. But for what? The money they transferred to his offshore account it is almost an insult. $250,000? For a man of his stature? That is not a betrayal. That is a severance package." Dante was silent, watching her. He had learned to respect her instincts. They were different from his. He saw threats, she saw patterns. "He was set up," Clara continued, her fingers flying across the keys, pulling up a different set of files. "He was a scapegoat. A loud, obvious distraction. The real traitor would not be so cheap. The real traitor would be patient." She pulled up the file on his cousin. "Enzo, the man with the gambling debts." "You looked into Enzo," Dante said. "You found nothing." "I was looking for weakness," Clara said. "I should have been looking for ambition. I cross-referenced Enzo's lost shipment manifest from last month. The one you covered for. The numbers were faked. He did not lose that shipment. Dante, he sold it. He sold it to Mick Russo." She turned in her chair to face him. The pieces were slotting into place, cold and sharp. "Enzo has been skimming for over a year. Small amounts, then larger. He used his gambling debts as a cover. He needed a way to destabilize you, to make you look weak so he could make a move. He needed a monster. So he funded one." Dante's face was stone. "He funded Mick. He gave him money, information, and access," Clara said, her voice low. "He told Mick about me. He told him about Jamie. He used Luca, feeding him just enough bad information so that when you looked for a traitor, you would find the old man, not the blood relative." She had found the real leak. She had discovered the evidence. She had expected to feel triumphant Instead, she just felt tired. She had just handed the man she loved a reason to destroy his own family. She presented the final proof, a series of encrypted bank transfers from Enzo's shell company to an account Mick controlled. There was no denying it. Dante took the folder from her. He walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the city he owned. He was silent for so long that Clara began to feel the chill of the glass. "What will you do?" she finally asked. He did not turn. "He's my uncle's son. He grew up in my home. We shared a table. He tried to have you killed," Clara said, her voice sharp. "He used a trafficker to terrorize me and to paralyze my brother. What table you shared does not matter. He is blood, Clara." Dante's voice was rough, torn. "Family blood. It still matters." This was his hesitation. This was the wall she had not been able to see. He was a modern king, but he was still bound by ancient tribal rules. Clara stood up and walked to him. She did not touch him. She just stood beside him. Two figures reflected in the dark glass. "When you held me while I cried for Jamie, was that blood? When you came through those warehouse doors, when I thought I was dead, was that blood?" she pleaded. "You are a better man than he is. You are a better man than this. This world wants you to be. But you cannot be that man and also be a hypocrite." She finally touched his arm. He was rigid. "You told me this life was about rules. He broke them all. Do what is right, Dante. Even if it hurts." He looked down at her hand on his arm. He closed his eyes, his long exhale fogging a small patch of the window. He finally nodded. A single, sharp movement. He pulled his phone from his pocket. He did not call his cousin. He called his enforcer. "Vittorio," he said, his voice completely dead, void of all emotion. "I have a job for you. My cousin, Enzo. I want him removed." He paused, and Clara could feel the last thread of his old life snapping. "Take him to the airport. Put him on a plane to Sicily with nothing but the clothes on his back. Tell him if he ever sets foot on this continent again, I will kill him myself." He hung up. He did not look at Clara. He just stared out the window. A king who had just ordered an exile, severing a piece of himself in the process. The removal of Enzo created a vacuum. The immediate threat was gone, and a new, heavy peace settled over the penthouse. But it was not the peace Clara had craved. It was the sterile silence of a hospital room, a place where you were safe, but not free. The tension between them built, a quiet, insidious thing. They would make love, their bodies moving together with a practiced, desperate intimacy. But afterward, Clara would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind 1,000 miles away. She realized what she wanted. It was a terrifying, impossible thought. She wanted out, not from him, never from him, but from this, from the armored cars, the silent guards, the constant weight of fear. She brought it up one night. They were in the kitchen, a rare moment of domesticity. She was cooking, and he was sitting at the counter, watching her. "I was thinking," she started, her voice small. "A dangerous pastime," he murmured, a rare smile touching his lips. "I want to leave Briarwood," she said, all at once. The words hung in the air, cold and sudden. His smile vanished. "We cannot. It is not safe yet. There are still cells. Men loyal to Enzo." "No," she said, turning to face him, the wooden spoon in her hand. "I do not mean for a vacation. I mean for good. I want to leave. I want to take Jamie and go somewhere new, somewhere quiet, somewhere by the ocean, somewhere normal." He stared at her. Normal. He said the word as if it were a foreign language. "Yes, normal," she said, her voice gaining strength, "where I can work in a cafe, and Jamie can be in a facility that does not need armed guards, where you can just be a man, not a boss." Dante stood up slowly. He walked around the counter, his face a mask of disbelief. "You do not understand what you are asking," he said, his voice low. "I think I do," she said, standing her ground. "No," he said, and for the first time, his anger was not cold. It was hot. "You do not. This is not a job, Clara. This is not a company I can just resign from. This is my name. This is my blood. This is the life I was born into, and it is the one I will die in. So you are just a prisoner?" she cried. "What is the point of all this power if you cannot just walk away?" "I walk away, and I am dead," he roared, slamming his hand on the counter. The silverware rattled. "I walk away, and every enemy I have ever made, every family that wants this city will come for me. They will come for you. They will come for Jamie. The only reason you are alive is because I am who I am. The only safe place for you is right here, by my side." "I do not feel safe," she screamed back, the tears she had sworn she would not cry finally coming. "This is not safety, Dante. This is a cage, a beautiful, expensive, terrifying cage. I am tired of being afraid. I am tired of checking every car, of flinching at every loud noise. I do not want to be protected. I want to be free." The argument died, leaving a cold, heavy silence in its wake. They were at an impasse. He could not leave, and she could not stay. They went to bed that night in silence. Two strangers on opposite sides of a king-sized mattress, the chasm between their worlds too wide to cross. Mick Russo had lost his patron. He had lost his funding. He had lost his mind. With Enzo gone, he was a loose end, a rabid dog with nothing left to lose, and he knew exactly who was responsible. The call came 2 days after the argument. Clara was in the penthouse alone. Dante was in a meeting across town, one she had begged him not to go to, the burner phone, the new one, the one only 3 people had the number for, rang. She answered, her heart already sinking. "Hello, Clara girl." His voice was a rasp, a wet, ugly sound she had hoped to never hear again. "Mick," she whispered, her blood turning to ice. "You thought I was gone, did not you? Thought your psycho boyfriend could just exile a man and clean everything up. But Enzo, he was messy. He left loose change, and I am that loose change. Sweetheart, what do you want?" she said, her voice shaking. "I want to hurt him," Mick hissed. "I want to take from him what he took from me. My business, my future, my..." My pride. And you are his pride. Are not you? He's not here, she said, trying to stall. I know. Big meeting with the longshoreman. Very important. Mick chuckled. But I am not interested in you right now. I am interested in the package. A cold, sick dread filled her. What package? It is amazing what a fake ambulance and a forged transfer order can do. Clara, your boy's new guards, the believers, they are good, but they are not good enough. They are indisposed. He is with me, and he is terrified. Clara ran to the laptop on Dante's desk. She pulled up the live security feed from Jamie's new secure room at Green Valley. The screen was black. The feed was cut. She stumbled back. A strangled sob caught in her throat. No, you're lying. Am I? Mick said. She could hear a faint sound in the background, a whimpering. Jamie's. He is with me, and he is going to die, unless you come and talk me out of it, a face-to-face. Just you, alone. Where? She breathed. The old shipping yard, Pier 4. You know the one. You have 1 hour. You come alone, or I put a bullet in his head. You tell your boyfriend. He dies. You are late. He dies. You bring anyone. He dies. Do you understand me, Clara? The line clicked dead. She was going to be sick. This was it, the trap, the one she had always been afraid of. She knew she should call Dante. He would tear the city apart. But 1 hour, he was across town. By the time he got his men, by the time he got there... Mick was not lying. He was desperate. He would kill Jamie. She had to go. She ran to Dante's desk. She was not the same girl. She was not a victim. She had learned. She knew it was a trap, but she also knew she was the only one who could save her brother. She had to leave a trail. She grabbed the keys to one of the clean cars in the garage. No driver, no guards. She knew Dante had a tracker in it. That was the first trail. Then she grabbed a small, heavy, silver medallion from his desk tray. It was a St. Christopher medal. His mother had given it to him. He never went anywhere without it, and he had left it behind in his hurry this morning. She clutched it in her hand, the metal cold and biting, and she ran for the elevator. The shipping yard was a graveyard of metal, the rusted skeletons of cranes outlined against the bruised purple sky. The wind howled off the river, cold and sharp. Clara got out of the car. He was there, just as he had said, standing under a single, flickering spotlight in the middle of the loading bay, and Jamie was with him. Her brother was in his wheelchair, his mouth covered with silver duct tape, his eyes wide and streaming with silent tears. Mick stood behind him, a gun pressed firmly to Jamie's temple. You came, Mick sneered. His hair was wild, his eyes manic. He was a man with nothing left. I am here, Clara said, her voice shaking but steady. She held her hands up, palms out. I am alone. Let him go. Mick, this is about me. It always has been. Oh, it is about you, Mick said, laughing. It is about you and him and this whole rotten city. You think you are better than me? You, a hash slinger? You and your rich psycho? Let Jamie go, she said, taking a slow step forward. He is a boy. He's paralyzed. He cannot hurt you. He is his leverage, Mick screamed, pressing the gun harder. Jamie whimpered, the sound muffled by the tape. Dante's leverage, and now he is mine. Clara had to stall. She knew Dante would be coming. He would know she was gone. He would see the tracker. He had to. What do you want, Mick? She said, taking another step. Money, is that it? Dante will give you anything. He will let you go. I do not want his money, Mick roared. I want him to feel this. I want to take what he loves. He took my business. He took my patron. He took everything, so now I take his girl. And I take his legacy. He smiled. A terrible, broken thing. Killing you is business. Killing the kid, that is just pleasure. You are a coward, Mick, Clara said, her voice dropping, low and cold. You have always been a coward, hiding behind other men, hiding behind a paralyzed boy in a wheelchair. You are pathetic. His face contorted in rage. I am the one holding the gun. Are you? She whispered. Or is it holding you? As she spoke, She let her hand, the one at her side, open just a fraction. The silver St. Christopher medal fell from her grasp. It hit the wet asphalt with a tiny, almost inaudible clink. She nudged it with her toe, sliding it under the chassis of the car, where it would be hidden from Mick, but where it would catch the light. "You talk pretty, Clara girl," Mick said, his voice dangerously soft. "All that time in the castle, it made you bold. It is time to end this." He took the gun away from Jamie's head. Clara's heart seized. This was it. He walked around the wheelchair, never taking his eyes off her. He raised the gun, his arm steady. He was not pointing it at Jamie. He was pointing it at her. "Any last words?" he sneered. Clara stared down the barrel, her heart hammering so hard it felt like it would break her ribs. She thought of Jamie. She thought of Dante. She looked Mick in the eye. "He is coming. He is too late." Mick's finger tightened on the trigger. A gun was raised, a shot fired. The sound was deafening, echoing off the empty metal containers, scattering the rats in the darkness. The shot was deafening, an explosion that echoed off the rusted metal and flat water. Clara stood frozen, braced for an impact that never came. She opened her eyes. Mick Russo was still standing. His arm was still raised, gun pointed at her, but his expression, the one of sneering triumph, had been wiped away, replaced by a look of sudden, profound confusion. A small, dark hole had appeared in the center of his chest. He looked down at it, almost curiously, as if he had spilled something on his shirt. A second shot, louder, cracked through the night. This one hit him in the head. He did not make a sound. His body simply crumpled, a puppet with its strings cut, and he collapsed to the wet concrete. His gun skittered away, clattering harmlessly against a pile of debris. Clara's gaze snapped to the darkness from where the shot had come. He was not a shadow this time. He was a storm. Dante Moretti walked out of the darkness and into the dim yellow light of the shipping yard. He was not wearing a coat. His sleeves were rolled up. The gun in his hand was still smoking, held with a steady, practiced ease. He did not look at Clara. His eyes were locked on Mick's body, his face a mask of cold, absolute finality. He walked past her, his boots splashing in a puddle, and stood over the man who had haunted her life. Without hesitation, he raised the gun and fired a third time. An execution, a full stop. Only then, with the threat annihilated, did his head snap toward the wheelchair. "Jamie!" His voice was a raw, guttural bark. He was at his side in an instant, his men, Vittorio and 3 others, fanning out from the darkness, securing the perimeter, their efficiency terrifying. Dante dropped his gun. Pulling a knife from his belt, he sliced the ropes binding Jamie's wrists and ankles, his hands surprisingly gentle. He ripped the duct tape from Jamie's mouth in one quick, practiced motion. Jamie was sobbing, a high, thin wail of terror, his body trembling so hard the wheelchair rattled. "You are safe," Dante murmured, his voice rough. He put his hands on Jamie's shoulders, a gesture of grounding. "He is gone. It is over. You are safe." He turned to Clara. She was still standing, rooted to the spot where Mick had intended her to die. She stared at the body of her tormentor, then at Dante, who was now kneeling, his hand on her brother's knee. He was a killer. He was a monster. And he was her savior. He had come. He had found her. He had saved them. The terror of the last 8 years, the adrenaline of the last hour, the unbearable weight of her entire life, it all evaporated in an instant, leaving a hollow, gaping void, her knees unlocked. The ground rushed up to meet her. She did not hit the concrete. Dante was there. He had crossed the space in a heartbeat, catching her as she fell, pulling her against his chest. She collapsed into him, her face pressing against his shoulder, her hands weakly gripping his shirt. He held her, his arms like steel, one hand cradling the back of her head as she was finally consumed by the sheer, crushing weight of relief. She woke to the sound of sirens, but they were not frantic. They were polite. She was in the back of Dante's sedan, the door open. He was kneeling on the pavement in front of her, wiping the grime from her face with a handkerchief. "You are all right," he murmured, his voice low. "It is over. You are safe." Clara looked past him. The shipping yard was awash in the blue and red flashing lights of half a dozen police cars, but they were parked in a neat, respectful semicircle, keeping their distance. Two uniformed officers were talking to Vittorio, who was not in handcuffs. He was gesturing, explaining, and the officers were nodding. They were taking notes as if receiving instructions, not conducting an investigation. A detective in a rumpled trench coat approached Dante's car, taking his hat off as he got closer. "Mr. Moretti," the detective said, his voice quiet and deferential. "Looks like you had a bit of trouble here." "It is handled, Detective," Dante replied, his voice flat. He did not stand. His focus remained on Clara. "Yes, sir, that it is." The detective gestured to Mick's body, which was already being zipped into a bag. "We found this known trafficker and his associates. Looks like a rival gang dispute got out of hand. A real shame for the neighborhood." He glanced at Clara and then at Jamie, who was sitting in the back of another sedan, wrapped in a blanket, one of Dante's men sitting beside him. "We will clean this up. No need for you and your family to be troubled. A terrible thing to witness. We will be out of your way in 20 minutes. "Thank you, Detective," Dante said. The detective nodded. "Have a good night, sir." He turned and walked away, back to his men. Clara stared. He had not just bought their silence. He had bought their loyalty. The entire police force was just another arm of his empire. The realization settled in her stomach like lead. This was his world, a world where murder was a dispute and the law was just another employee. This world, his world, was the very thing that had saved her. And she knew. In that moment, she could not be a part of it. They did not go to the penthouse. They went to the hospital. A private wing, sealed off by Dante's men. Jamie was in a private room, checked by the best doctors in the city. He had been sedated. He was, for the first time in 4 years, sleeping a deep, peaceful, and truly safe sleep. Clara stood by the window of the adjoining suite. She had showered in the private bathroom, the hot water stinging her skin. She was wearing a pair of pale blue hospital scrubs. Outside, the sun was beginning to rise, painting the skyline of Briarwood in shades of dirty pink and gray. She felt hollowed out, scrubbed clean of everything. Dante stood by the door. He had not slept. He had not changed. He had spent the last hour on the phone, his voice a low, lethal murmur, rearranging his world, tying off the loose end that Mick Russo had been. "He's safe," Dante said, but his voice quiet in the sterile room. Clara did not turn around. "For how long, Dante? For today? For this week?" She turned to face him. Her eyes were not angry. They were not sad. They were empty. They were exhausted. "I cannot live like this anymore," she whispered. He misunderstood, his jaw tightening. "I will double the guard. I will move him to a new facility. I will build higher walls. No one will ever touch him, or you, again. That is the problem," she said. And a single, final tear traced a path down her cheek. "I am tired of walls. I am tired of being protected. I am tired of running. And I am tired of fighting shadows. I'm tired of waiting for the next gunshot, wondering if it is for me, or for Jamie, or for you." She took a deep, shuddering breath. This was it. The final, awful truth. "I love you. God help me. I love you so much I cannot breathe. But I cannot be this person. I cannot be your queen if the throne is in a prison. I cannot raise my brother in a fortress." She looked him in the eye. "I am leaving. As soon as Jamie is cleared to travel, I am taking him, and I am disappearing. I am going somewhere that has never heard the name Moretti. I am going somewhere." Normal. She was leaving, with or without him. He stared at her. She braced for the anger, for the argument they had in the kitchen. She expected him to tell her she was a fool, that she was ungrateful, that leaving was impossible. Instead, he looked broken. The mask of the dawn, the cold, controlled facade, it crumbled. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of profound, human exhaustion. "I am tired, too," he admitted, his voice a rough whisper. He crossed the room, coming to stand beside her at the window. He did not touch her. They stood shoulder to shoulder, two reflections in the glass, watching the city wake up. "My whole life," he said, his voice soft, I have been fighting to hold this city, fighting to protect my father's legacy, fighting to atone for Sophia." He looked at her, his dark eyes raw with a truth he had never spoken aloud. "When I saw you in that shipyard, when I saw his gun on you, I realized I was not afraid of losing you. I was afraid of being you, of being the one left behind again." He shook his head. "But I was not saving you tonight, Clara. I thought I was, but you were saving me, you and Jamie. You are the only thing that is real. This." He gestured to the gray city below them. "This is the ghost." Clara's heart, which she thought had turned to stone, began to beat again, a slow, painful, hopeful rhythm. What are you saying?" "I am saying you are right." He finally turned, taking both of her hands in his. His skin was warm. "I told you I cannot just walk away, and I cannot, but I can tear it down. I can end it." He proposed his solution. "I step down. I turn over the empire. Not the shadows, the legitimate businesses. I hand them to a trusted ally, Vittorio. He can manage the shipping, the real estate, the rest, the criminal world. I will let it go. I will cut the ties. I will dissolve the crews. I will retire. I will give it all up." "You would do that," she whispered, not daring to believe. "For me? For us?" "I would do it for me," he said, his voice firm, the power returning to it, but different this time, softer. "You showed me what is real. Clara, I am not letting that go, ever." She did not believe he would do it. It was his name, his blood, his entire life, but he did. It took 2 weeks, 2 weeks of quiet, final, and ruthless decisions. It was not a grand abdication. It was a surgical dismantling. Clara sat by his side in the office, a queen presiding over the end of an empire. He signed over the legitimate holdings, billions of dollars in assets, to Vittorio, the man who had questioned his weakness and had, in the end, proven his unbreakable loyalty. The criminal enterprises, he simply let go. He cut the ties, he paid off his captains, he told his men they were free. Their debts erased, he sent a shockwave through the national underworld. The great Dante Moretti, vanishing. But Dante Moretti did not care. On a rainy Tuesday, he walked out of the penthouse elevator for the last time. He carried 2 suitcases. Clara was waiting for him in a simple, non-armored sedan. Jamie was in the back, a nervous, excited smile on his face, a sketch pad in his lap. Dante got in the driver's seat. He did not look back at the glittering skyscraper. He did not look back at Briarwood. He put the car in gear and he drove away, disappearing from the public eye he had once so completely and so violently controlled. 4 months later, the name Moretti was a ghost story in Briarwood, a legend whispered by old men in bars, hundreds of miles away, in a quiet lakeside town where the air smelled of pine and rain. Anna served coffee. She worked 4 days a week at a small cafe with a view of the mountains. She smiled at the locals. She knew their orders. She went home at 3 o'clock. Home was a small, white house with a large, covered porch, set back from a lake so still it looked like glass. Her brother, Jamie, was there. He was enrolled in a world-class neurological center in the nearby city. He was not walking, but he was thriving. He was learning to use a state-of-the-art, hand-controlled system, and he was painting. His canvases, full of bright, shocking color, filled the walls of their small, warm home. And Dante was there. He was not Dante Moretti. He was just Dante. He spent his days reading. He sat on the porch and read newspapers from cities he used to own, his expression unreadable. He read novels. He chopped wood for the fireplace. He had, Clara noted with a small smile, learned to cook. He was quiet. He was present. He was impossibly at peace. One night, they sat on the porch in silence. It was late summer and the air was cool. A string of simple, pale lights glowed above them. Jamie was inside, asleep, his door open. Clara leaned her head against Dante's shoulder. He was wearing a simple flannel shirt, not a tailored suit. She slid her hand into his His knuckles were not bruised. His hands were calloused from the axe, not from a fight. "You came when no one else did," she whispered into the darkness, a truth she had held since that first night. He was still for a long moment, the only sound the chirping of crickets in the tall grass. He turned his head, kissing her forehead. His lips were warm and real. "You gave me the signal," he replied, his voice soft. They did not need to say anything else. He wrapped his arm around her, and she leaned into him, her head resting on his chest. He held her. She held him. They sat under the vast, silent, and indifferent stars. It was not the desperate, frantic embrace of the penthouse. It was not the grip of fear or the clutch of shared trauma. It was quiet. It was steady. It was a choice. Clara Leone and Dante Moretti were, finally, free. Thank you so much for listening to our story. We are so grateful to have you here. We would love to know where you are listening from. So please drop a comment and let us know. Be sure to subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories so you never miss a new episode. And finally, please share your thoughts on Clara and Dante's journey in the comments. We cannot wait to read what you think.